last night after a 127-98 blowout win over LeBron's Cavs in Cleveland. Atlanta made 16 of 28 shots from three-point range. Atlanta trailed 50 to 38 in the second quarter, but somehow outscored Cleveland 89-48 the rest of the way. Was this just, Stephen A., more about bad Cavs than good Hawks, in your opinion?
Oh, I definitely think it was, because there's no way on earth that the Cleveland Cavaliers are that bad and the Atlanta Hawks are that good. Coach Budenholzer, a disciple of Greg Popovich, is doing an outstanding job coaching the Atlanta Hawks. Let's make that very, very clear. He is quite impressive, and he continues to shine. When you consider the personnel that he has on his roster, Paul Millsap and Al Horford, Jeff Teague, DeMar Carroll, guys like Mike Scott coming off the bench, and, Kyle Korver still doing what he's doing as a shooter. They have decent players, but at the same time, you don't expect the level of success that they've enjoyed thus far. So let's give them credit. But at the same time, they're not, 40 points better than the Cleveland Cavaliers over the final, 2.5 quarters or so. I don't believe that. And so when you look at it and you look at the way Cleveland was playing defense, that was the concern coming into this season about the Cavaliers. We knew they could score. We knew they could put up points. Why Kyrie Irving only took about 9 shots last night and hit 4, I don't know why. He's picked most of his shooting, Skip, for after the game was over when he went back out there to practice on the court. Kevin Love certainly wasn't 100%. He banged his knee. Yep. We've got to monitor his health. LeBron James still doesn't seem like LeBron James, even though I'm very confident he'll get it together. But defensively, no rotation on defense. Wide open shots for one guy after another. Shelvin Mack, who came into the game averaging less than 4 points per game, hits all 6 of his three-point shots, and a lot of them were wide open. I mean, you just wondered, where was Cleveland's defense at? And this is something they're going to have to get fixed. Blatt said he was embarrassed by their performance. I agree with them, even though I can understand how LeBron would say otherwise, because he did lose 36 points in the finals against the Spurs a couple of years ago. He did lose by 36 points in a playoff game in the first round against Washington back in 2008, if I remember correctly. But that doesn't negate the fact that last night was a hideous performance by the Cleveland Cavaliers, because they did not look like they could defend a mini-me. That's their problem right now, defense. And if they don't get their act together on the defensive side of the floor, they're not going to do much come these playoffs. And if they don't do much, you're going to see changes in Cleveland. Anything less than a trip to the conference finals is unacceptable for this roster based on the expectations they walked into the season with, Skip. They're not going to say it, but it's the truth.
Okay. Yet, Stephen A. Smith, on several recent nights, we have lauded and applauded the Cavaliers' defensive approach, that they have concentrated harder. They have locked down. When they're right, when their minds are right, all of them can play decent on-ball defense and decent team defense. That's why, to me, last night was more about the Atlanta Hawks, the visiting team, than about the home team. And I agree with you. Obviously, the Hawks aren't 40 points better than the Cavaliers. But remember, a couple of weeks ago, we had a discussion about the overall Eastern Conference, and I called you on glossing over the Atlanta Hawks. Remember when I did that? And I said, wait a second, you can't eliminate them from being a contender, because I think they are a dark horse contender in the East. Coach Budenholzer, as you point out, longtime disciple of Coach Popovich and learned at his knees, sitting next to him on the bench. He is now turning the Hawks into Spurs East. And they sliced and diced last night. They picked Cleveland to pieces with their system. This is the one team that the Cavaliers can't just out-talent, out-athlete. You can't just go out and say, hey, you take your turn, I'll take my turn. Kevin Love can have his turn. You can't do it against these guys because their system is too good. And by the way, Stephen A., you mentioned Jeff Teague. He didn't even play last night. So that Dennis Schroeder, every time I watch him, the kid from Germany, he's pretty good. He started last night, and I thought he played pretty well. And then all of a sudden, as you point out, Shelvin Mack comes off the bench. He ain't afraid. He did make 6 out of 6, which isn't going to happen again, probably. But my point is, the system worked last night. They looked Spurs-like in crazy way, it reminded me a little bit of some of the Spurs games against LeBron's Miami team last June, where just the system took over and threes are raining and the ball's moving, and you're like, who do we cover this time? And all of a sudden you look up and you're getting blown out. And again, LeBron's team last year in the finals lost by a record margin, and it was like a microcosm, if you will, of what happened last year in the finals last night. This Atlanta team, no joke, not to be taken lightly, and I think they're going to be in the mix as a dark horse contender when playoff time comes.
If we're going to put it in its proper perspective, let's remember that one of the reasons we're going to call them a dark horse is because we're unsure about the talented crew in both Toronto with the absence of DeMar DeRozan, along with Washington, who's still a relatively young team, not to mention the fact the health of Derrick Rose always remains a question mark. We see some inconsistencies on the defensive side of the ball from Cleveland. That's why we're saying Atlanta's a dark horse. We know they can play. We know Budenholzer has proven he can coach. But we're calling them a dark horse because of our questions about guys in the Eastern Conference as opposed to Atlanta being so formidable.
Okay. To me, I like Atlanta more than Washington. You prefer Washington. I'm not sure about them. I'm not sure about the system that they have, if you can trust it. Now, Paul Pierce has made you make a great point. He's a difference maker late in games. In close games, you can just put the ball in his hands, and he's still got that magic factor. He just makes shots. He makes big plays. And maybe the Hawks don't have that guy, but they have a better – I think they're a little better coached than – and not that I have any big issues with Washington. I just think they're better coached in Atlanta.
Well, I just think you got to think about this. I think John Wall – he can be enigmatic, a bit wild, but he can also be great. I like John Wall. I think Bradley Beal, I think this kid Beal is the closest thing I've seen to Allen Houston. And I think the combination of Nene with Martin Gortat on that front line gives you a size and physicality, not to mention Paul Pierce, the closer. Atlanta does not have that. They don't have his leadership. They don't have that championship pedigree, and they don't have a closer like Paul Pierce. I think that's what gives Washington the edge over Atlanta, even though I think that Washington would need to have a better record so they could have home court advantage if they were to meet.
So I still have Cleveland making it to the conference finals, but I must tell you, depending on how it falls out, if Cleveland runs into Atlanta in an earlier round of the playoffs, or who knows, I don't know, maybe in the conference finals for all I know, I think Cleveland will have trouble with Atlanta, and I think a message got sent, an early season message got sent last night that we have the formula to beat you because, well, as Kerry pointed out, that 89 to 48 run, that's preposterous. But they're saying we know how to do this against you guys, even in your own building. That's a pretty big message to send.
You can know how to do whatever you want to do, but if you're going to try to derail LeBron James from pursuing another title, I think you're going to have to come a little bit better than the Atlanta Hawks to convince me that can be done.
Stephen A., before we get out of here, we didn't have an opportunity to react to you guys' commercials. Santa is not happy with you. You guys.